What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mick Thinks Tiny. My name is Mick. So, you buy your tiny house, and 6 months later, it completely falls apart. What do you do? That's our topic today. We're going to hear from Lawrence. Lawrence is going to talk about their experience living in their tiny house for the past few years. Going to answer all those questions y'all have been asking about maintenance, what happens if something falls apart or it leaks, and is there any way to prevent a buyer beware sort of situation when you're a first-time tiny house buyer? If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Let's jump into it. Let's find out about Lawrence's experience, and let's learn about what happens after you buy your tiny home. All right, I am here today with Lawrence. Lawrence is a fellow YouTuber. They are the creator of Lawson Woods PNW here on YouTube. Lawrence, thank you so much for being on the channel. I'm super excited for people to just hear about your experience and learn about sort of like life after buying a tiny house, if you will. If you don't mind, just to start, can you just talk a little bit about what got you interested in tiny houses just in general?
Yeah, so what got me really interested was a couple of things. I wanted to have a smaller footprint, a smaller carbon footprint, because I am, an advocate for our beautiful planet. It's the only one we have. And so beyond that, though, it really came down to affordability. I had been a renter for my entire life, and it seemed like the housing market wasn't going to be an option for me. It was just astronomically high. And so I started looking at other options, like what could I do? And I had a previous friend of mine who built his own tiny house, and I kind of helped him with some of the process of it and got to learn a lot. And it inspired me. I was like, okay. And this was kind of in the beginning stages of the tiny house movement, if you will, around 2015, 2016. And so I started looking into it. And then I was like, yeah, this could work. I could do this. And ended up finding my first tiny house. I've had two now. My first one I called the micro tiny house. It was very small. It was only 92 square feet.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, but I loved it. I really did love it. And it started out as like my weekend retreat, really. And then ultimately, once I relocated up here to the Pacific Northwest in Washington, I had realized it wasn't quite enough space. So I decided to go bigger, and I have now a 28-foot tiny house, which is very nice now.
That's a huge difference in size. That's really cool, though, that you were able to get something so small in the beginning and kind of like test it out and see if it was something that you really wanted to do. And it
Yeah.
definitely seems like, and it's almost like 10 years ago now when you first started the
Wow.
journey. So that's really awesome to see, where you ended up now. For the tiny house that you're in now, what was that buying process like? Were there any like sort of like must-haves you had to consider, or like anything about like just how that whole process went for you?
Well, I was looking online trying to find a tiny house, and I actually went through tinyhouselistings.com and looked in my area, the Seattle area, and I found a couple. And I kind of reached out to them. I didn't have a whole lot of money up front, but I wanted to see if somebody would be willing to do like an owner finance type situation. I did find this particular house. It was pretty much unfinished. Most of the stuff was done, but for instance, the kitchen wasn't built out, the bathroom wasn't completed. But as far as the electrical and plumbing and most of the interior was already done. So, and the price was right. It was only 17.5,
Okay.
and I was like, okay, I can work with that. That's something I can work with. And so I reached out to them. I proposed an idea and said, "Hey, would you be willing to, with a down payment, do owner finance for 3 years?" And the gentleman
Yeah,
said,
cool.
"Yeah, I'm interested. Let's meet." And so I met up with them and got to look at the tiny house. It was out in the middle of a farmer's field, and it was a very rainy day. It probably wasn't the best day to actually go look at it in hindsight because I found some potential. Well, there were issues later on with the tiny house.
Okay. What was the owner financing like? I think that's like,
Yeah.
it's really great that you thought to ask that. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, especially for people that are considering that are going tiny that are watching? Financing's a huge one.
Yeah. Back a few years ago, there were very few finance companies that are willing to do tiny house financing.
Mhm.
So I went the route of owner finance. And basically, what it comes down to is coming up with an agreement between you and the other party. We did a 3 year with, I think I put a couple thousand down, maybe 2,500. I don't quite remember now, but a decent down payment, and then broke up the payments over 3 years. We did draft it up with a lawyer and had it notarized and all of that. And basically, what it came down to is if I did not complete the payments, no harm, no foul, it would go back to the individual, and they would keep that money. So they had, obviously some incentive there either way, because if I didn't pay it, they were going to get the structure back. So they had some security there.
Mhm.
For me, it was a little scary because if I didn't make the payments, obviously that situation could have happened. But
Mhm.
fortunately, worked full time, and that wasn't an issue. So was able to come up with payments on time, paid it off, and yeah, I felt really good about that part of it.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's a really cool option for people. Hopefully, people that are watching consider that the next time that it's one of the advantages of being able to talk to individual sellers directly compared to maybe like a larger company. You'd have to go through more, formal channels for financing. But yeah, that's a great option. And I'm gonna remember that one because I think that's something that most people wouldn't think to ask about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that on your channel you've talked a little bit about some of the things that you've noticed over time, and a lot of people have reached out. On my channel they've asked me like, what happens after someone moves into their tiny house? What kinds of challenges have you faced, sort of like as a tiny house owner? Like, what sorts of things have you start to notice? Because I think it's been about 4 years you said since you bought the home.
Yeah, it's been just about 4 years now. I think I purchased it in 2019, the end of 2019, early 2020. The first thing I noticed was, um, I think it was the electrical that I noticed. Everything seemed to be fine, working fine, except for in the kitchen. I noticed if I had too many things running, like lights going, and I don't know, maybe the microwave or a coffee pot or something that takes a certain amount of power, it would trip the breaker. And I thought, oh gosh, okay, we've got a problem. And so I couldn't figure it out on my own. I ended up having to hire an electrician, and they came out and realized that it wasn't necessarily a problem with how the electricity was installed, or the wiring rather. It was more of the breaker itself. The individual breaker for the kitchen was too small. I think it was, don't quote me exact because I'm not not real keen on all of that, but I think it was on a 30 amp breaker, and they moved it up to 50 or 60, something like that. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah, so once they did that, I haven't had a problem since then with the electricity.
Okay.
Um, but then, fast forward a couple more months, and some other things started happening. I noticed there was water on the floor
Mhm.
near the inlet where the water comes into the house. And I was like, well, that's not right. Obviously, there's a leak here somewhere. And so, unfortunately, I wasn't really sure where exactly it was coming from. But come to find out, after getting into the wall behind where the inlet is, this was built with PEX plumbing, and you either love it or hate it. But that's kind of what people are using now. But this was the early PEX plumbing where they were using the rings that go around to tighten around fixtures and whatnot. So one of those rings failed, and it was a slow leak. It wasn't a huge leak, but it was enough that it started causing uh, dripping down through the pipe, down to the floor. And so thankfully I caught that relatively decent time, and had a plumber come out because it was beyond. I didn't have the tools to repair it or the know-how, really. I mean, you could always look things up, but by the time I ended up purchasing all the tools, it was going to cost just as much to hire a plumber to come out and fix it. So thankfully, I had the plumber come out. They actually did a little bit of work as well to shore up the other areas around it. So it was a good thing. And then, let's see, probably 6 months later, I noticed near my bathroom uh, wall, kind of up near the ceiling area, which was so weird. I couldn't figure it out. I thought maybe it was a roof leak or something, but there was water that would occasionally drip down the inside of the house, and on the wall. And I said, okay,
It's
we got
weird.
to figure this out. Yeah. Yeah. And I thought for sure, I was like, okay, maybe a window seal, 'cause couldn't figure it out. Well, anyways, come to find out, another O-ring for this PEX plumbing had failed. And they actually ran, I don't know why they did it, no idea why they did it, but they ran the plumbing up through the wall, over the ceiling,
Oh.
and back down. And so, just so strange. But apparently, one of the junctures where they met, one of those rings had failed. And that, unfortunately, had been leaking for quite some time, and I did not know it until it started showing up, through the wall. So that was quite an ordeal. I had to, again, hire a plumber to come back out. Another, I forget how much. It was a lot, $400 or $500, something like that. It was ridiculous. But they came and fixed it, and then I had to clean up because there was mold, so I had to go through and clean up the mold, and so that was quite an ordeal. But so I would say some advice would be, if you can have like a home inspector come and check out the structure before you buy it, that's probably a really good idea. Another thing, I should have mentioned this first, but one of the first things that I noticed when I got the house and I plugged everything in and pressurized the system and turned the water on, they didn't use PEX plumbing, or I'm sorry, they didn't use putty or plumber's tape around any of the connections. And so as soon as I turned the water on, every connection from the washer dryer to the bathroom to the sink just started spurting water everywhere.
Whoa.
So I was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And so that should have been my first clue right there, that maybe these weren't quite professional builders. But
Had you already brought it? Had you already brought it home at that point? Like,
yeah, I'd already had it
okay.
home. And because it was in a farmer's field, there was no way to like test it ahead of time.
Oh.
So I wasn't able to test the electricity. I wasn't able to test the plumbing. I was going on their word. And so anyways, it was a fix that I was able to do. I just put, the tape, the plumbing tape over each fixture, and haven't had a problem since then with that part of it. But really, that should have been my first clue that something was, not quite right. So.
No, that makes sense. And I feel like, I mean, that's a lot of different things. So, like, not wiring the house, not having the house set up for enough energy for, someone to be able to run enough appliances, and then the plumbing as well too. But I think it's a tough one, because I do feel like sometimes you want to make sure that you want to get the tiny house that you want, right? So like, you went online and you found one that you like really fell in love with. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of a bummer, because you paid 17,000 for yours.
Right.
To have someone like a professional grade builder custom build a 28-foot tiny house today could
Oh, yeah.
cost you $100,000,
Oh,
depending on who
easy.
you go with. So like, you're not gonna find a $17,000 tiny house today. I don't
No.
know if you can find one at all today, but the
I,
equivalent, maybe 30 grand or something like that. Like, it's, I think it's a money game at this point. So it is tough. I think it was great that you were able to save so much money. But to date, how much money have you put into the tiny house to do all the repairs since you got it?
Yeah, great question. I would say repairs, as far as repairs go, because I had a plumber out a couple of times, an electrician, and a few things I had to do on my own. I would say around 2,000 in repairs. And then to finish out the build, it really came just around 30,000, because I had to put a kitchen in and the bathroom, and put a wall in for the bathroom and a few other things. So, and it was kind of at the height of the pandemic as well.
Mhm.
So lumber prices were really high. Everything was really high. So, but yeah, all said and done, I would say 33,000 or so, which is a steal. I mean, you can't get that
Yeah,
now at all, like you said. I mean,
no,
most tiny houses of this size, at least, are,
no,
at a low end, 30, maybe. I
maybe.
probably
I
not
haven't
even.
seen one. I think I've
Yeah.
seen them as like 60, 70.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
60,
I
70.
didn't feel bad about it ultimately, because I did learn a lot through the process.
Mhm.
It enhanced my skills. And because the price was right, um, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, a lesson learned, I guess. But because the price was right, I didn't feel too bad about it. Now, fast forward a couple of years, everything's been fine since then. I haven't had any issues. No plumbing issues, no electricity issues, no structural integrity issues. So it's been fine.
Mhm.
But when you're buying somebody else's project, you just don't know what you're getting. I was told that it was a father-son who built it. The father was apparently in construction, is what I was told.
Mhm.
And the son, not so much, but I don't know. I kind of went on faith, I guess. Blind faith at that. But
Mhm.
it is what it is. It was a lesson learned. And
Yeah.
would I do it again? Yeah, I would actually, because first, the price was right.
Yep.
Second, I learned a lot from the experience, and ultimately, it is my home, and I'm very thankful to have it. So
Mhm. Was there anything in the contract language around refunds, or if you find any issues or anything like that?
it's a good question. As far as that goes, no, there was no refund. It was as is. It's stated in the contract. The house is as is, and there would be no refunds, no warranty, nothing like that. So
Okay.
um, that could be a clue for other people if you're looking and coming up with a contract. That might be something you want to negotiate because it would have been nice to have that flexibility. But again, because the price was right, I took a risk and I took a
Mhm.
chance.
Mhm. No, I think that's fair. And I think that there are plenty of people, watching that will resonate with them because there are a lot of people trying to find tiny houses on a budget, even from, big companies or, well-known builders. And I think the contract is kind of really important to pay attention to, but also being able to test things as well too. So what would you say, I guess, to someone who's watching and they want to try to find a tiny house for under 50K? Like maybe they're going to go on tiny house listings after this and see what
Sure.
they can find. What advice would you give them before they, put a down payment or like give
Yeah,
anyone any money?
definitely. I would say go visit the tiny house and, if possible, see if they can, if they don't have electricity, see if you can bring a generator out or if they have a generator so you can test things like the plumbing, I'm sorry, like the electricity. If they have a water connection, test it out, test out everything. The other thing I'll mention is make sure you check out the actual foundation. So this tiny house was built on a foundation from 1970. So, yeah. And I didn't know that. It wasn't disclosed. So I didn't find out until much later on after I paid it off and I got the actual title in hand to realize that it was built on a trailer from 1970. So, and thankfully it was okay. There was a couple of spots of rust that I found after about a year or two, getting underneath the house and putting in some of the drainage and plumbing for my septic. That's when I discovered, oh, there's a little bit of rust here and there. Wasn't terrible, but enough that for concern. So I went through and I used Rust-Oleum paint and I painted the entire um, trailer itself. And I've actually done that twice now. And since then, it's now been skirted, so there's very little possibility for water to get in. And so I feel confident that it's okay. It was a very strong trailer. It was, I believe, it was used to transport farm equipment. It was pretty uh, durable, I guess. Pretty, I don't know, but yeah,
That makes that I think that's really good advice. I feel like I would say even if you're going to go to a builder that is reputable or a builder that is well known, I would still say everything that you're saying makes sense. Like check the lights, check the water pressure, check all of those things too. I think sometimes we assume that just because they are established, it means that the home is going to be well put together and it won't leak a year later. But we know that's not true. So
right,
I would say that what the advice that you're giving is really great, and it applies to just any sort of tiny house that anyone wants to build. I think your experience definitely reminds us all not to just sort of take things at face value and go off of what people say. You want to trust people. I think I've had a lot of people comment on the channel, that they want to be able to trust people, and they're shocked that sometimes people
yeah,
aren't always as truthful. But at the end of the day, they are trying to sell something, and
right,
so maybe they'll embellish a little bit. Maybe they'll say that they've been in construction for 10 years when really it's only been one. You
right,
never know.
exactly. Yeah, I would say if you do buy from a private person and they do, say that, oh, yeah, I'm in construction or whatever, see if you can get more information about them too. Maybe do a little research on the person that built it because I didn't do that. And who knows? Maybe they weren't really in construction for all I know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, but as long as you are willing to take a risk, but not lose everything, and kind of make a smart risk, if there is such a thing, by talking to them more, uh, by getting somebody to come out and look over the property. Yeah, you can do a home inspection, which I didn't think that was possible for tiny houses, but I have found since then that, yeah, that you can do a home inspection. And it's funny because I've had comments on previous videos where I talked about some of the problems I've had with the tiny house, where a lot of people said, "Oh, this even happens with brand new tiny houses that are built, by a professional company," and there are horror stories with that even. So I would say, and it doesn't matter if you're going through an individual or a large company, I would still get a home inspection and test things out ahead of time to make sure. And if possible, when you're putting that contract together, see if you can get some sort of warranty put in there, if possible.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great advice. So no, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and chat
Yeah.
with everyone. I know that anyone that watches is going to get a lot out of this because this is a huge question that a lot of people have on their minds. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why people are hesitant to move forward in the process because they don't know what's going to happen, 6 months to a year later, and it's a lot of money. Seventeen
It is.
thousand dollars is a lot of money. I think we forget sometimes that even paying 10 grand for something, it's a ton of money to save up for and to, be able to do that. So I appreciate you taking the time to be honest with people, be vulnerable and share your story. I'm excited for people to check out, your YouTube channel. So link to that will be in the video description so they can reach out and check out more of your videos and, help, just watch you in your journey. So yeah, I appreciate you taking time to be on the channel and chat with me.
Thank you, Mick. I appreciate it, and thanks for giving a shout out to my channel too. I
Oh yeah,
appreciate
of course.
it.
Always. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you.
All right, that was my conversation with Lawrence. I appreciate Lawrence being extremely open, being honest, being vulnerable, not sparing any detail with us about their experience living in their tiny home over the past 4 years, and also just having a really well-rounded view about it. So, like, after everything that they've been through, just saying, you know what, I love my tiny house and I've learned a lot. Please reach out to Lawrence. Go check out their YouTube channel, Lawson Woods PNW. There's a link here in the video description. Go support them. Go follow their journey. If you have any questions, make sure that you reach out and ask questions to them too. They are a great resource. I can't stress that enough. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching. You can also check out these other videos I've got here of other people that are living in tiny homes. They talk about some of their experiences as well too, from DIYers to people who bought their tiny homes from tiny house companies too. So make sure you check those out. And as always, don't get the thing tiny. I'll see you guys in the next one.